able to attend? So,
No, Louisa has a medical issue and is unable to attend today. And again, I am going from my regular day job to this job. I do not have the agenda in front of me.
Brandon, can you just give us a quick rundown of the agenda, and then we can call the meeting to order and go from there?
Absolutely. Just two items, Mayor Pena. Approval of minutes from the July 22nd meeting, and then there's a surface water comprehensive plan update that staff's prepared to present as item 2.
Okay. I have had a chance to look at the past minutes. So at this time, I'll ask for an approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from 7/22.
Okay, and I'll second, so they're approved. And at this time, I'll take us to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. This is Tyler Beakley, Surface Water Engineer 2 for the City of Des Moines. I just wanted to do a quick intro to this topic before I introduce our presenters. We're continuing with the 2015 Comprehensive Surface Water Comp Plan check-in, and we've been continuing to strategize different strategies to get these projects, these high priority projects, completed within the time frame. And there's a few alternatives that we've been considering. So today we have Austin Fisher and Julie Brandt with Parametrics, as well as Matt Hobson with the FCF's group to continue the presentation and present the staff recommendation to the committee. And I'll pass it over to Austin.
Thanks, Tyler. So just a quick kind of 100,000 foot overview. The city approved a comp plan for the surface water utility in 2015. A year or so ago, we started off looking, retained by the city to look at and assess how we do the first 5 years, and then how are the next 5 years to plan looking. So we've gone through that process now. We've had a couple of meetings with the committee talking about the capital improvement plan, running through some various scenarios and ideas. And so at this meeting, we finished what ultimately ends up being a 48-page document that's sort of a supplement to your 2015 plan. And what we'd like to do today is just present kind of the overview of that. Julie will kick it off, give us a quick recap, and then talk about the MPDS permit side of things, basically. And then Matt will talk about a little bit about the changes in the capital improvement plan, and then how that resulted in an update to the financial plan. So with that, I'll kick it over to Julie.
All right, so let me share my screen here. We've got a presentation prepared for you. And just to confirm, can everyone see these slides okay? Great.
Yes.
So yeah, as Austin mentioned, I'm going to run through a quick overview of the elements of the update that we've included that are based on some new permit requirements, and then turn it over to Matt to talk about financials. That was one of the biggest focuses of this update. Austin already went over the history of this and how this is a mid-plan update, understanding how much can be completed by 2024. And we're really focusing on what the actual spending has been so far. And as long as we're doing this mid-plan update, to look at a few new permit requirements and how those might shape your future needs. This provides a brief overview of the previous permit requirements, and we're really focusing on the new ones that are in blue down here. That's watershed development planning that's now required by the state. This is very similar to development planning you've been doing for years. And then some business source control measures that they want to make sure all phase 2 communities get on their books and implement inspections for. So quick overview of those 2 new requirements. There's the comprehensive stormwater planning. You're required to have an interdisciplinary team so that this work goes outside of your surface water group. And it's a way of collaborating with your long range planning and other departments within the city, transportation, parks, etc. We did take a look at your low impact development code requirements, which had already been recently updated. So we think you're good there. And then the culmination of all this is to write a stormwater management action plan report that will highlight one selected high priority basin. Some of the key considerations of this group is really about proactively integrating the stormwater management into your growth management land use planning, so that the stormwater isn't really an afterthought. It's something that moves along with development. And update and create kind of planning, development, and policies and regulations that are specifically based on the receiving water needs, and not just kind of that they're customized to Des Moines and the receiving waters that you have. Next, moving on, there's the source control program is the next new requirement in the permit. And this, they're really hoping for a proactive program where you get out and inspect businesses and properties. The city's already doing a lot of this, to require operation or structural source control BMPs. The phase one, the larger communities have already gone through this, and so they took lessons learned from that. The 5 elements are getting a specific ordinance on your books, getting good inventory data, both narrative and then in GIS, knowing where your businesses are, getting folks on the ground to do inspections. We really recommend that those inspections are combined with others that are already taking place. And for your enforcement, you want it to be a progressive enforcement, so that it's all about compliance assistance at the beginning. And they have guidelines for how specific elements that they want your staff trained up on. There's some guidelines about how the ordinance needs to be shaped. Most jurisdictions are finding that the business inventory is really a robust portion of that, and it takes a little time to get that nailed down right. And as I already mentioned, there's really good strategies about making sure ways that you can combine these inspections so that you're not overburdening the businesses by having them pause their activities for multiple different inspectors on different days. So for the stormwater BMP opportunities, the things that we're recommending that we found through this update that we're recommending for upgrades a little bit, really looking at existing and new treatment and flow control facilities. And again, there's this common theme of addressing how they can integrate with development over time and anticipate it rather than react to it. Our recommendations: keep moving forward with the CIP that you have on the book. As I talked about, coordinate with transportation to identify possible overlaps. That's especially the other department. But if there's other opportunities in parks and community building and things like that, reevaluate this annually and continue to prioritize public health and safety as you have been. One element that we want to specifically discuss, because it was a focus of the surface water group as part of this update. We know that tree retention in the city is an important issue. And so we did examine this carefully and come up with a few recommendations. Trees do have meaning for surface water management. However, and this is very similar to, Parametrics has done a lot of work with other jurisdictions, and everybody is trying to figure out trees right now. We know they're important, but our recommendation is that it can't be approached from just one city department. It really needs to be a comprehensive look at what the different goals, the different metrics, how the city will give credits and keep track of things as regarding the existing canopy cover and future increase of and credits for tree planting. And so there's pros and cons of how the trees help with stormwater and ways that it can be cost prohibitive. So we absolutely recommend that that continuation, that consideration continue, but that other groups and citywide effort be rolled into that, so it's not just a surface water initiative. So for the state, and then finally for the state stormwater permit, the biggest change moving forward, I've already mentioned, is that cross-development coordination on land use planning. and really thinking about specifically targeting stormwater opportunities to collaborate and overlapping CIP projects. That's the intent. Ecology has stated that that's the intent behind the permit, and based on our experience with Des Moines and kind of what you guys are already doing, this is really going to be meaningful for you moving forward.
Just a quick question on that.
Certainly.
What do they mean by CIP coordination, department coordination? I mean, I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around what it is they're after there that people haven't been already doing.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So for Des Moines, there's a lot of these elements that you have already been doing. And now Ecology, with this SMAP program, the Stormwater Management Action Plan, a lot of it is about documenting that collaboration. And so the 3 final requirements of the SMAP are facility retrofits, kind of the on the ground CIP projects that you may already have on your books. The 2 others are looking at ways to potentially update land use, future development and policies. So that's one thing that may be a little bit more, or the documentation may be a little bit different, that goes beyond just the CIPs. And it's ways that surface water, transportation, and other departments can kind of declare to Department of Ecology, hey, we've looked at these goals together. Here's some places where we share the same ideas and where we're going to move forward, share some funds, look for ways that we can coordinate the timing of our projects so we're all on the same page. And then the final element of the permit requirements are to take your already existing NPDES permit program and just ramp up the elements that make sense in the target basin that the city will eventually select. So those are the 3 things: is ramp up the permit program, have land use development policies in place that you can clearly document to the state of where you're doing that coordination, and then implementing those policies and goals by building some stuff on the ground.
If I may, is that cross-department coordination a formalized process? Like, in other words, is there an ecology form that one fills out with every project to demonstrate, that you did that stuff?
It's not necessarily an ecology form, but there is a formal process as part of the SMAP requirements. And it's called, for this purposes, it's called an interdisciplinary team. And Tyler, if there's any elements of the progress that the city has made thus far on that, if you'd like to address, but Des Moines has formed its interdisciplinary team and has had meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give a quick update to where we're at with that. So we have formed our interdisciplinary team. It is a few folks in stormwater engineering. We have Andrew Merges from transportation, and we have Laura Tachico from planning. So that's our committee thus far, and we're still sort of in the preliminary stages of it. But yes, it is a documented committee that Ecology will be asking for. Essentially, has it been established on our next annual report with them?
Thank you.
And unless there's, and we're happy to answer any additional permit related questions that may come up, so just let us know. But unless there's any other questions right now, I'll turn it over to Matt to talk a little bit about the financial analysis.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm joined also with John Ghilarducci. He's the president of FCS Group, and he served as principal on this study. Just in terms of context, the financial plan, why it's important is because the city's surface water management program is an enterprise fund. What that means is that the cost of service is paid for by users of the utility. That there are fees assessed twice a year to pay for this utility. And that serves 2 purposes. One, it ensures that the funding source to maintain this program is independent from tax dollars and other funding sources. And the purpose of the funding plan then is to ensure that those rates can sustainably fund your operations into the future, not just today, but throughout the next several years. So when we approached the committee last March, we presented two rate plan options. One was funding the capital plan within the next 5 years, so through 2026. The other option was recommended by staff, and it would extend the capital program by an additional 3 years to 2029, with the goal of mitigating some of the future rate adjustments that would need to have to happen to fund the capital program. Both scenarios also include annual funding of $100,000 for unforeseen capital projects. So in addition to what we have on our schedule, there's additional $100,000 earmarked every year from rates for any unforeseen projects. So over the summer, we recalibrated the financial plan to align with some recent cost and schedule changes. And over the next 5 minutes, I'll just summarize those changes and the impacts to the rate adjustments. Overall, it's generally good news. We identified another $0.6 million in new project costs. However, those are being offset by about $700,000 in new funding sources from primarily the Lake Haven Water and Sewer District. Next slide. So here's just an example of what the capital program looked like, the 9-year capital schedule in March, where we see, kind of the peak in 2024, some high dollars in 2021. Next slide, please. So with this update, we see is a few projects were moved from the 2020 and 2021 time period into 2022. That's that orange stack. So those are new rescheduled projects. What that generally means is we just have a little more pressure in 2022 for funding these capital projects. About $700,000 of these new costs are going to be offset by additional funding from the Lake Haven Water and Sewer District. Next slide. So big picture, even with these changes, if we stay with that 9-year capital plan, the rate adjustments we estimated back in March, they remain the same. That as long as the city increases rates by that inflationary increase each year, which we assume is about 3% per year, that you can fund not just your operating costs, you can fund the entirety of the capital program, the $100,000 annual earmarked for unassigned capital projects, and still retain your operating reserve above minimum levels. That's with this 9-year plan. Next slide. If we instead look at the compressing the capital plan to the immediate the next 5 years, because of that additional cost pressure in capital in 2022, we're going to need a little higher rate increases, looking at 5.5% annual increases above and beyond the inflationary adjustment, so that the net total increase would be something closer to about 8.5% per year to rates if you wanted to do the capital program through 2026 in its entirety.
So Mayor and Councilmember Harris, just to put this into perspective, the rate increases for next year are likely in the 5 to 6% range for. So if you went with this approach, you'd be looking at 11 to 12% increases in swim rates. That's what he's saying, and above and beyond your normal cost inflation issue. That we've seen tremendous inflation this last year, so I just throwing that out there, that this would be a pretty significant lift for us.
And by accelerating the program, it looks like we'll get more done faster potentially. Supply chain and other issues, I think, can get in the way of that. It feels to me like the right thing to do is stay on the current inflationary course that we're on. But are we creating new risk to the city that we wouldn't necessarily have the ability to mitigate if we don't go down this path? Or are you concerned that do you have any concern at all with us staying on the current inflationary path?
So a question then for the team, I guess this is an alternative. This isn't what's recommended. the recommendation is to extend it out for the additional years and,
Correct. The previous
maybe-
slide is
Yeah.
the staff recommendation,
okay.
or yeah, there we
I
go.
guess the question that I would have, I think that I tend to agree with this approach. My question is, $100,000 per year for unforeseen projects. Is that enough? Because the one thing about the unforeseen projects that we know, we're going to have them every year. They always come up, especially in swim, and when they do, they're expensive. So I guess my question would be, is the 100,000, is that enough? Given what we've seen over the last 10 years, Lauren, of unforeseen projects.
Well, and the additional water and so forth through various weather conditions that haven't been expected. You know, is there, to your point, Dan, is there, like, if we did, what did we say, 3.5%, if we went another 0.5%, does that, I'm just worried about risk to the city and to the community. I'm trying to keep the rates as reasonable as we can, but I also don't want to put us in a situation where if something happens, we can't really address it and have this fund be successful. And then all of a sudden you're looking at a rate increase because it has to cover its cost. You're looking at a significant rate increase.
Well, if we have a 9-year schedule, that's a lot of projects in 9 years. And we'll certainly be monitoring the projects and shuffling these projects as if one becomes more urgent to do. But I believe this 9-year would capture all the high priority projects that we had in our original plan. Isn't that right? Awesome.
Yes, that's correct. So all the projects identified in the capital plan would be completed within the 2029 timeframe.
Yeah, so, you know, at 100,000 a year, you know, these things do tend to come in, you know, unexpectedly, and if that's the case, it means shuffling these projects around once again to accommodate that. But over 900,000, hopefully we could, you know, include a pretty sizable project if it get one that's unplanned.
But Mayor, to your point, I think that you know, I'd be comfortable with this approach. And I think that, you know, we'd be in a comfortable position to address, you know, that this would address your concern. I mean, I don't think that this puts the community at any added risk per se. Yeah, it would be nice to have these projects done faster, but the cost to do that, I think, to the community would be unacceptable.
Okay, that's, I mean, I'm just trying to make sure that we're all on board understanding any risks coming in. And I didn't think about, you know, the shuffling approach. You do have a lot of a reasonable amount of flexibility there. So I'm satisfied.
We do have, I think, a slide that shows the rates, our rates compared to the other cities somewhere.
Yeah, then we can jump to that. I think it's slide 7. One more slide. There we go. So our
Yes.
existing,
We're-
these are the.
We're getting quite up there on our rates. You know, a lot of these cities don't have inflation adjustments like we do. So 2022, we're like 4th from the top.
So a question I would have on this for the team, are some of these other cities, is their rate structure somehow established differently than ours, which is indicative of maybe the cost deal here? So maybe they're funding their swim program somehow differently, or or maybe their facilities aren't in as bad a shape as ours, or, you know, what's driving the difference here?
I could speak to that, Matt, if you're,
Yeah, go ahead, John.
in most cases, they are, I'm sorry, I'm so blurred out there. I don't know what's going on with that. But in most cases, they're using the same basic rate structure. They don't have the tiered residential rate that Des Moines does, but that has no effect on what we're seeing here. What we don't see is what many of these agencies will be doing in the coming years. I know like Redmond's been at that rate for almost 5 years, and they're probably due, you know, and some of these other folks are due for increases. But the rate structures are generally the same.
So if I may, it just seems like this is sort of a binary kind of a deal. Is there any way to quantify the risk? In other words, the possibility of another Woodmont slide, or and yeah, I'm just struck by it's sort of an all or nothing kind of a deal. And
Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily a way to quantify an easy way to quantify the risks that you're talking about. I think, you know, as I'm looking at this chart and where we're sitting in relationship to some other cities, perhaps, council members, is that, you know, our infrastructure, you think about Des Moines, you know, and it was all King County at one point, and we're facing the same issues that the county is facing. And look, you know, we're really close to what the county is at for their rates, and we're replacing all of their old infrastructure. That's really the issue. It's all that old junk that they put in, and so at least we're kind of consistent with what they're having to do as they begin to update their system.
Okay, so that's my point. Are there any opportunities to make these rates more granular?
What do you
In other
mean
words,
by granular?
Well, to adjust them based on, you know, areas that have the older inventory.
Our whole city is that way. So all the projects we've identified are the high priority projects that, and in order to do them, I guess that's the point we're making, is that these are the rates that we'd have to have in order to do these, just the high priority projects that we have in the next 9 years. So
Is it also fair to, I mean, yes, there's some flexibility, but I think we're a long, narrow city with several outfalls that maybe some of these other cities aren't saddled with in terms of, you know, some of the outfall issues that they have to deal with. I mean, we have a lot of shoreline, maybe comparatively. Just a thought there.
Would there ever be an opportunity to adjust rates based on income, or, you know, more granular in terms of property size?
Actually, Councilmember Harris, I think we can leave that to a future council or whatever. I'll tell you, we all in this city share in the surface water management program. And that's one of the challenges, is that as we became solvent and sustainable, that didn't address the infrastructure and so forth that hadn't been addressed for a number of years. And we have to do it. I don't think it is, I don't think it's reasonable to consider coming up with a cost that isn't shared by the entire city. But I would leave that to, I mean, this is where we're at this point. I think anything that needs to be approved will have to come to the dais. And I, at this point, yeah, I don't like being fourth from the top, but at the same time, I'm going to like flooding, and I'm going to like other problems within the city far less. So I think we just have to take this And I think the staff has done an excellent job of, carrying it out over 9 years. Again, I asked the question earlier about risk because I do know that things come up, and I do know that the infrastructure is a little older. Well, not a little, but it's, as Dan said, we're cleaning it up.
I know
So-
that Councilmember Harris, we've looked at that specific question in the past. And there are rules against that particular, dividing the costs in the way that you've suggested.
No, I'm just trying to figure out how to get it done faster, but still be so equitable. So anyway, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, there are a few things that the city already does with its rate structure that aren't really shown on the graph. What you're seeing here is the rate for a medium sized single family residential customer, and the city charges different rates depending on the size of the impervious footprint for its single family residences. And for all the non-residential commercial developed property, they're charged based on their impervious footprint. So there is granularity in that sense. We're just showing the base rate here. You probably knew that already, but
Yeah.
I
just,
did, but I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, I think that's an excellent point. Thank you, John.
thanks.
All right, I had one quick question, then you can continue, Matt, but on the project list, I think it's table 3, that shows sort of the 9-year versus project layout. Is there, are these all rate-based revenues, or is there an assumption for the city to potentially receive grants? Is it a mix? Just a quick question on that.
Yeah, so these rate increases would cover the revenue needed net of those grants and any proceeds from other jurisdictions. So we have several $1 million from grants, and I mentioned Lake Haven Sewer District that are coming in as other funding sources. And so
Okay,
these
so we
rates would fund those after getting after those grants, and then this is the remaining revenue we need to recover through rates.
So we are requiring even some grants to get there. Okay.
Okay, I think we can just jump to the last slide. Okay, great. And so this is just a kind of an outline of what that, if we were looking at, this is not the staff recommended option, this is the more aggressive option where we would need rate increases above and beyond inflation. You generally see that if inflation were 3%, and I know Dan mentioned it's probably gonna be higher this upcoming year, but at a 3% plus additional 5.5% clip, and that's anywhere from $1.75 to $2 more per month per household for a typical residential customer. The inflationary adjustment, if it were 3%, would be more along the lines of a 60 cent to 75 cent per month adjustment to a typical residential customer. I think that's it. There's one more slide, but it's just a summary of everything. Just as the staff recommendation is to extend the capital plan through 2029. You can get there as long as you're making just those inflationary adjustments to your rates. If the decision is to instead compress into 2026, we would be looking at some more pronounced increases to all customers.
So 5.5%, there's nothing specifically magical about that, except for that's what's needed to compress it down and to complete it to 2026. So I mean, I suppose that when we bring this forward, council members, you could say, well, we'll do the inflationary cost plus 2%, and maybe you could shave a couple of years off. I mean, so you could do something like that if you wanted, where it wasn't quite such an impact, but it doesn't have to be 5.5%. If you wanted to compress it a few years, you could do that, I suppose.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And with, so this is the staff recommendation, is to extend it to the 2029. And if with committee concurrence, the next steps would be to draft a resolution to bring to full council for approval before the end of the year would be our goal. Mayor, you asked a question about, is there any risk with the projects we are extending? We did look into that between the last Environment Committee and now, and we feel confident that there is no risk in those projects we are extending. But again, to Lauren's point, if something unexpected did happen, there's room to move around projects and shift.
I will tell you that I am fine and with drafting the resolution and bringing it forward. Councilmember Harris.
Sure. But I would ask that, at the presentation, it's just, yeah, it's fine. I think that if the public just understood, that it's like 75% versus, or 75 cents versus a couple of dollars, one might be able to plausibly sell, $2, just for the greater good, but, fine. 2029 it is.
Yeah, Tyler, we can certainly add that to or Councilmember Harris, we can add that to the presentation to kind of put these percentages into actual dollars and cents. So you can kind of see what that actually looks like.
Perfect. Yeah, I was anticipating, again, yes, a presentation on that committee night to full council. So we can take those notes and essentially add more detail and then make it more understandable for the general public as well.
Okay. That's reasonable.
It's just that there are these things like police and, where we're going to have to start sort of selling some ideas of, long-term benefit to the community, not just here, but, across a lot of domains. And, it can't just be that everybody is like, oh my God, 8% or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, $2, all right.
Talking about it in that context does make sense, Councilmember Harris. I agree with you, because it means, you're talking half a latte per month. And that does make sense. The challenge that I have found always is that if surface water management wants $2 more a month, and this other program wants this per month, and this, it's the sum.
Yeah.
And they have a hard time, because we address these topics independently, they don't see it. They just get their tax statement and go, oh my God.
Right.
But I think our role as leaders, in my opinion, is to look at this, look at the risk, and look at the likelihood of success, keeping taxes as reasonable as possible while still meeting the needs of the infrastructure and the community. So I do trust the staff. They are the professionals. And we have, parametrics working with us. I feel like if the likelihood of success is very high and all are comfortable in their recommendation, I think that's what should come to the dais, to give the council and the community other things to ponder during that discussion. I think taking it out of the realm of percentages and putting it in the realm of dollars is more meaningful, and could mitigate some of the backlash that, like you said, 8%, 10%, oh my God. Whereas $2, you don't know. So, but I think they should bring it forward.
Agreed. Yeah, that's fine.
Great, noted. That concludes this item, unless there's any further discussion.
I don't think so. And that also concludes our agenda.
Great.
So we are a few minutes ahead of time. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor, obviously. We made the motions and seconded it. So I want to thank everybody for their time today. And I do apologize for being late. As you know, that this is not our full-time job, and some of us still have other full-time jobs, and I had meetings that ran over. So I apologize. It's not that your time is not important to me. It was beyond my control. And I think my record will show this is not normally what I do. So anyway, thank you very much for your patience.
No
Thank you.
apology necessary. Tyler, will you give me a call real quick? Thanks.
Will do. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.